Welcome back to SENDit.Brainsatwork, where we are going to have honest conversations about neurodivergent minds navigating a world that wasn't always designed for our different brains in mind. And we're still part of the myth-busting summer series. So today's myth that I really want to tackle and I feel really needs challenging is neurodivergent people can't be leaders. Now, when we're thinking about a typical leader, we often have a very specific image in our minds, or I do definitely. So someone who's confident, someone who's organised, calm under pressure, someone who knows exactly what to say. And then obviously they remember everything, they never miss a deadline, effortlessly managing a team, somehow having an inbox with 0 unread emails. And basically, now I'm saying it out loud, I can hear it myself. This is a mythical human being. It's not real, it's never going to happen. But somewhere along the way, we've confused looking like a traditional leader with actually being a good leader. And they're not the same thing. Leadership isn't about having the loudest voice in the room. It's not about being the most organised. It isn't about being able to sit through 6 back-to-back meetings without wanting to hide in a cupboard afterwards. And it definitely isn't about having a brain that works in one particular way. So we're going to look today at what neurodivergent leadership actually looks like. And before we go any further, I think it is really, really important to say that not every neurodivergent person has the same strengths. You know, not every autistic person is fantastic at spotting patterns. Not every ADHD person is incredibly creative, because I can tell you right now, there is not a creative bone in my body unless it's creating chaos. But other neurodivergencies can help support with this, but it doesn't automatically make you a great leader. It's not a superpower checklist, because we're all really, really different in our own rights and in our own ways. But there are characteristics that some neurodivergent people experience that can bring the real value to leadership. And one of them is pattern spotting. So, some neurodivergent brains are incredibly good at noticing connections, inconsistencies, or problems. Because you might be sitting in a meeting thinking, hang on, haven't we done this before? And not only do you remember that you've done it before, you've already worked out that every time you do it, the same problem happens. Everyone's looking at you and wondering how you've noticed. And meanwhile, your brain has apparently been quietly collecting evidence for the last 6 months without telling you. It means you are good at spotting risks where something isn't working, connecting information that other people haven't connected yet, and obviously asking the questions that nobody thought to ask. That can be leadership. And then I think a really important one is empathy. There's a stereotype, particularly around autism, that neurodivergent people lack empathy. But empathy isn't something that looks the same in everyone. So some neurodivergent people actually experience emotions and empathy incredibly deeply. And if you've spent years feeling misunderstood, excluded, masking who you are, or trying to navigate environments that weren't designed for the way your brain works, you may know exactly how it feels, and especially when you don't feel heard. So that experience can obviously influence how you lead. Maybe you're the person who notices someone hasn't spoken in a meeting. Maybe you question whether something is genuinely accessible. Maybe you're the one who says, hang on, have we actually asked the people this decision is going to affect? Because that is such an important skill. And you might not think of this as leadership, but it is. And then there is creativity and different thinking. I think many neurodivergent people will recognise this situation, because someone explains a process and you ask, well, why do we do it like that? And they reply, because that's how we've always done it. And we get that quite a lot, but possibly one of the worst answers you can give a neurodivergent person. Because now we need to know everything. Why do we do it this way? Who decided it? When did they decide it? Does it still work? Has anyone questioned it? And the most important one, could we do it differently to make it work better? And somehow what started as one innocent question at 9 o'clock in the morning has now become a complete redesign of an entire process by lunchtime, probably with a spreadsheet, possibly with a new logo that nobody asked for, but then there's something important underneath. Leadership needs people who question things. It needs people who challenge assumptions. It needs people who can imagine that something could be better than it is now, because we can always make things better. And sometimes it's thinking differently is exactly what creates the change. Then there's hyperfocus, which I'm a huge fan of most of the time. And this is when something genuinely gets your interest, when there's a problem you desperately want to solve, or when something really matters to you. Some neurodivergent brains can go incredibly deep, researching, learning, connecting ideas, building something, problem solving. And of course, that all means looking at the clock, realising it's 2 a.m, and you've created a 47-page business plan for an idea you had 6 hours ago, with all the branding, of course. But when that focus is directed towards something meaningful, it can actually be really, really powerful. It can help build, the expertise and drive forward ideas. It creates innovation and it inspires change. And again, that can be leadership. So maybe the problem isn't that neurodivergent people can't lead. Maybe our definition of leadership is too narrow, because leadership doesn't always look like standing in front of a room, giving an inspirational speech. Sometimes leadership is noticing something that isn't right and saying something about it. It could be suggesting a different way. Sometimes it's asking the uncomfortable question. It's advocating for someone who isn't being heard. And sometimes leadership is simply saying, actually, this isn't working for me, and setting a boundary. You don't need the word manager in your job title to be a leader. You don't need people reporting to you. You don't need to be the loudest person in the room, and you don't need to be naturally charismatic. And you definitely don't need to change who you are to fit somebody else's image of what a leader is supposed to look like. Because sometimes leadership is incredibly quiet. Sometimes it happens without anybody noticing. And sometimes we don't even recognise it in ourselves until we kind of hear podcasts like this and we think, actually, this is describing me. Or we hear it from other people. So this brings me to this week's listener challenge. And I want you to notice one moment this week where you've led. Just one moment. Maybe you made a decision or suggested something or spoke up when something didn't feel right. Maybe you helped someone, challenged an idea, encouraged someone to speak or set a boundary and literally said no. Because when normally you would have said yes just to keep everyone happy, don't tell yourself this doesn't really count. Count it, because leadership doesn't have to be loud to be leadership. You might already be leading far more than you realise. And obviously in the next episode, we're going to take this conversation one step further. We've challenged the myth that neurodivergent people can't be leaders. Next time, we're going to open up that SENDit toolkit and get practical about neurodivergent leadership. But for this week, notice that one moment, a decision, a suggestion, a boundary, whatever it looks like, notice it, own it, and count it. Because different brains don't mean less leadership. Sometimes they just mean leadership looks different. So thank you for listening to me, and I will see you next week. Podcast disclaimer. The views, thoughts and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to the hosts. We are not experts, specialists or professionals, and nothing we discuss should be taken as advice. Our conversations are based around our own experiences, ideas and perspectives. They are intended for general discussion and entertainment only. If you need guidance, support or advice, whether professional, personal, medical, legal, financial or otherwise, please seek help from a qualified professional. By listening to this podcast, you understand and agree that the hosts are not responsible for any actions you choose to take based on what you hear.